She laughed when I told her I was selling my company. What she didn't know was the sale had nothing to do with money.
She laughed when I told her I was selling my company. It wasn't a nervous laugh or a surprised one. It was the kind of laugh that comes with pure relief. She leaned back in her chair, a slow, satisfied smile spreading across her face, and said, "Great, now you can finally afford my alimony." She said it like the outcome was already decided, like I was just a problem she had finally solved. We'd been married for 15 years, and somewhere along the way, respect had just quietly packed its bags and left the room. It had been years since she'd asked me about my work. She only cared about what it could give her, especially now that she was planning her exit. The sale, in her mind, was her victory lap, the grand finale she'd been waiting for. I didn't argue. I didn't try to explain the years of sacrifice, the sleepless nights, the risks I'd taken. I just nodded and told her she was right. That reaction seemed to confuse her for a moment, but not enough to wipe the triumphant smile off her face. Immediately after dinner, she was on the phone with her lawyer, her voice buzzing with excitement. I went into my study and closed the door, letting the silence settle around me. What she didn't know was that the sale papers caught a glimpse of were only one part of a much larger plan. For months, I had been meticulously restructuring everything, quietly, legally, carefully. I learned a long time ago that high emotions make people sloppy. And I refused to be sloppy with the life's work I had built from nothing. You see, the company wasn't being sold to another person or a corporation. It was being transferred into an irrevocable foundation. My name would remain attached as the founder, but the ownership was no longer personal property. It couldn't be divided, couldn't be claimed, couldn't be touched in a divorce settlement. And buried deep in the mountain of paperwork she had signed years ago, without bothering to read a single line, was a prenuptial clause that specifically excluded her from any company assets in the event of a divorce. She had signed her future away without a second thought. An hour after she had mocked me at the dinner table, her lawyer called her back. I could hear the shouting all the way from the kitchen. Her voice rose, filled with disbelief, then it cracked, and finally it went quiet, a heavy, defeated silence. She stormed into my study, her face pale, her eyes wide with shock. "What did you do?" she demanded. So I told her the truth. I told her there was no sale she could benefit from. There would be no alimony windfall. There were no marital assets to divide from the business. It was all gone, secured for a greater purpose. She accused me of betrayal. I just calmly reminded her that she had emotionally packed her bags and left our marriage long before I had legally protected myself. She called me cruel. I said I was just being careful. That night, she didn't sleep. I could hear her pacing, making frantic calls, sending desperate messages, searching for loopholes that simply didn't exist. By morning, the smug confidence she had worn like a crown for years had vanished. In its place was raw, unfiltered panic. The divorce moved quickly after that. Without leverage, without the financial upper hand she was counting on, she lost all interest in dragging it out. Her own lawyer advised her to settle for what she could get. She agreed. She kept her personal belongings, her car, and whatever savings she had managed to quietly siphon off over the years. Nothing more. A month later, she moved into a small apartment across town. I'd hear through mutual friends that she was complaining about the rent, about how unfair life had become, about how she was the victim. What she didn't know, and never would, was that the property management company she paid her rent to every single month answered directly to me. I didn't do it for revenge. I did it because life has a strange, ironic sense of balance. Our children, caught in the middle of this storm, chose to stay with me. It wasn't about the money. It was because they saw who remained steady while everything else collapsed around them. They saw who was shouting and rewriting history and who stayed calm and told the truth. They saw character, years past. The foundation grew beyond my wildest dreams. Scholarships were awarded. Schools were built. Countless people I would never meet were able to build better lives for themselves because I chose to protect something meaningful instead of letting it be torn apart by greed. I downsized my own life. I found that I needed less noise and craved more peace. My life became simpler, richer. One afternoon, years later, a message popped up on my phone from her. It was a simple one. I never thought you had it in you, it read. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. Selling the company wasn't the end of my life like she had so eagerly expected. It was the moment I finally stopped being underestimated, not by her, by myself. Sometimes people laugh because they think they've won. They don't realize the game was over long before they even opened their mouths. Thanks for listening. If this story resonated with you, consider subscribing for more.